So welcome to the Contemporary Issues class, and we have special guest today. Rev Amy is going to talk to us about Earth Day. Yes, we're looking forward to that. But first, our usual announcement. Zoomers, please mute yourself in the lower left corner of your screen when you're not speaking. We can keep the background noise down, and we are recording this for future playback. And I want to welcome any first timers. Mike, I want to welcome you to class. Thanks for coming today. Hope you'll come back and visit us. Any other first timers? I don't think so. So
Does that mean they're old timers?
old timers. Yes.
Yeah.
What's your timer? Yes. And anything's in the news today? Youth auction today at 3 o'clock, I think. Okay, yes, so that's always kind of a highlight of the year. Lots of good things help raise money for the church. So for the youth, right? Exactly. So come, it's always fun to bid on things and see what is going.
Yeah.
Anything else in the news? Good sermon today, I thought, not only about a strange story in the Bible, but about Earth Day. Mark tied it into how the earth speaks to us. The coral reefs tell us they're in trouble, and our animals speak to us. Those of us who have animals know that they talk to us without words, but they have their own communication. So if you missed the sermon, watch it again as usual. Okay, any other thoughts before we launch into Earth Day? Okay, Rev Amy has been with us for a couple of years now.
No, not even a year. We have been together long enough to have a baby. I figured that out. 3 months in, so we're good. Good.
And I want to thank Gene Dawson for recommending Amy to us today to speak about Earth Day. We know that Amy's done classes on Palestine and gender information and all kinds of things. And I didn't know you did one on Earth Day, but so glad.
She's a sister. Yeah.
She's a sister, leads the sisters discussion. So thank you for all the things you do here. So today, Amy does not have a PowerPoint. We're going to just have a discussion, and questions, comments, and let's talk about everything from what to do for the earth, or xeriscaping your yard, or voting for people into office who do care about the earth. And so it'll be a fun discussion. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you. And I'm happy to send out the PowerPoint that I shared with the Earth Keepers several months ago for just more information, but really wanted to have this be more conversational. And today share with you a little bit as we approach this 53rd anniversary of Earth Day. So Earth Day started back in 1970. And if you can imagine how the earth has changed since then, I wasn't born yet, but I imagine the planet was in a very different place. So here we are 53 years later, we're facing climate change. We're seeing all sorts of things. And I know people tell me yesterday, snow in Colorado in April is just something to expect. But we're seeing all around the planet kind of the impact of our choices as humans and the way that it impacts the earth around us. So just to kind of ground us today, Mark did a great job in the sermon, I think, of weaving in nature. We talked as a staff about really how to honor Earth Day. I think there's a variety of ways to do that. Earth Day was actually yesterday, but I really appreciate the idea of him weaving in the story of the donkey. And I think all throughout the scripture, starting in Genesis, leading all the way through Revelation, we hear about our call for the care of creation, that our responsibility that we have as people of faith to care for the world around us. Now, this starts actually in Genesis. And you may know the scripture that often gets referred to about the dominion of the earth, that humanity is given dominion over the animals. I don't really think of it as dominion in terms of a hierarchy in which we are kind of over instead of with all creation. So I actually think about it more as what's our responsibility to care for creation? What is it that we are custodians of, if you will? And so just to kind of ground us this morning, I pulled one of my favorite books. John Philip Newell, if you know the name, wrote this book, Praying for the Earth. So just to kind of gather us in, if you'll join me in this prayer for the life of the world. For the freshness of this day, O God, we give thanks to you. For morning's gift of clarity, its light, like the first day's dawn. Thanks be to you. In this newborn light, let us see afresh. In this gateway unto what has never been before, let our soul breathe hope for the earth, for the creatures, for the human family. Let our soul breathe hope. Amen. So this is a great resource. It takes you through the days of the week, and it has morning prayers, afternoon prayers, and evening prayers for the earth. And sometimes I travel with this book a lot, and it's just a way to kind of ground yourself into a sense of place. The other kind of beginning of our responsibility named in Genesis kind of refers to us as gardeners. And that comes from Genesis chapter 2-3. And it really talks about, the sin that we kind of partake in when we do not honor the earth. And, I don't talk about salvation a lot, but I do think there is something about salvation that's intertwined with how we see the care of creation. Because if we do not care for the earth and care for one another, none of us will live and live life abundantly. So just to kind of, I think first start off with the theology of why Earth Day matters. Jean and I were talking at our last conversation at the Earth Keepers event, how sometimes I think Earth Day, care of creation, all that gets kind of muddled into a political issue, but not seen as a response, an active response that we have as people of faith. And I think that's why the theology and grounding it in scripture is so important, because I think it comes out of our faith. I don't think it's something to be dismissed as it's just what we should do because that's the right thing to do, but it's actually what we're called to do. So Genesis has a lot of stories about the care of creation in it. So does Isaiah, and then in Mark. And I want to read to you from one of my favorite new books. This is a First Nations version of the New Testament. So it was actually written by indigenous people. And it's just the New Testament so far. But this is specifically talking about in Matthew, that the passage that Rev Mark quoted this morning from Matthew about the lilies of the field. This is a different version, and I want you to listen to hear, maybe in a different way, how this story about creation is told from the specific perspective of indigenous voices. This is why I am telling you not to be troubled about getting enough to eat or drink or what to wear. In eating and drinking or clothing yourself, is there all that is? Does your life not have more meaning than this? Look to the winged ones who soar on the wind. Do they plant seeds and gather the harvest into a storehouse? No, but the Creator from above gives them plenty to eat. Do you not know the Creator cares for you even more? Can worry even add one more step to the length of your life's journey? Why do you trouble yourself with what to wear? Have you seen how the wildflowers grow in the plains and the meadows? Do you think they work hard and long to clothe themselves? No, I tell you, not even the great chieftain stands in peace, wearing his finest regalia. was dressed as well as even one of the lilies. If the Creator covers the wild grass in the plains with such beauty, which is here today and gathered for tomorrow's fire, will the Creator not better take care of you? So just another kind of version of that familiar passage. And I think to imagine, to hear it, to see it, how scripture really gives us all this imagery and compels us to want to care for the beauty of the earth around us. The word eco, so when we talk about the care of the earth, eco-justice, eco-theology, eco-spirituality, the word eco itself comes from the Greek word, which means household or house, eikos, and family. So I think we also see ourselves as part of that larger care of creation in the family or the household of God. And that means what's going on in the earth around us. That's the term for eco. It's the same root word as economy or ecology, which is really, I think, our action out of the wholeness and care of God's creation. And so from that, there often is eco-theology or eco-justice or eco-spirituality, which has really kind of been around the church for a long time, but more recently defined in the last 40 to 50 years. And I think that really speaks to the interrelatedness of all creatures and beings. And Jim and I were talking about this not too long ago too, that sometimes people hear the word social justice, and again, they think it's an issue or something that's just a side to our faith. I want to invite us to think about care and social justice and all of this as essential to our faith, because I think it really is grounded in who God is calling us and created us to be. So Walter Brueggemann, if you know him, he's an Old Testament scholar, and he wrote back in 1990 these words: "The central vision of world history in the Bible is that all creation is one. Every creature and community with every other living in harmony and security toward the joy and well-being of every other creature." Can you imagine what our world would be like if we lived like that? I can't even hardly imagine it. As you know, or may know, for the last several years prior to coming to St. Andrew, I was a therapist and I worked in the area of grief and trauma. And we actually developed a program for young adults on eco grief, because the anxiety that exists in many young adults and all of us really, but that's the particular age group we were focused on. The anxiety that exists when they look to the imagined future and they see a world that will look very different, a world that really is in great danger. It creates a grief and anxiety in a younger generation, because I think they're more present to it, maybe more aware of it. I certainly, in junior high and high school, we weren't really talking about care for the planet. We weren't really recycling to the extent that we are now. But I think with the younger generation, they know if something doesn't change, they're going to be directly impacted by that in a way. And so we started this program to allow them to kind of really express their grief and anxiety, fear and worry about the future. And that's hard to imagine, to take in. Yeah.
I read a New York Times article last week that was saying that young people are, a majority of them surveyed are very pessimistic about the future, not optimistic at all. They really are thinking climate change is going to seriously impact them. And so it goes with what you were talking. And I had never really heard that or read that before, that they felt that a majority of them, when surveyed, felt so pessimistic. That's sad.
Yeah.
There was an article this morning about couples not having children because
I actually know people that's true for.
my sister never had children for that reason.
That kind of fits in with what I've been hearing from people in law enforcement for several years now.
We use speak up. Yeah, we can't hear over
It's what I've been hearing from people in law enforcement for several years now, that people in law enforcement consider mental illness to be the number one problem. in this country. So it kind of feeds into what you're saying about pessimism that young people are experiencing.
I know that way back in the 70s, before you were born, I was
I was
teaching,
born in 1974, so.
well, this was probably a little bit before that even, but I was teaching at a junior high school here in Littleton and teaching science. And we were really into Earth Days, really deeply into it. We took kids up to the mountains to plant pine trees where they had to be cut down for some reason. We did things around our own school building, taking class time to go out and dig and plant. And that was very important at that time because it was something that was talked about everywhere. And I often wondered what happened because I don't hear of that anymore. Maybe it's because people don't want to take their kids up to the mountains or something. I don't know. But I think those things are so important to do with children because maybe you wouldn't have this when they become young adults. You know, they would have some more information about what this is all about. But that was quite a while ago that we started really diving into that.
I think that's, Jane, that's so powerful. And you're right, we need to start early because I do think, to your point, Steve, it helps to give kids, youth, young adults, a sense of agency, a sense of what they can contribute. I would say I grew up in the deep South, and nature, in my experience, I mean, we planted maybe flowers for Mother's Day, but nature was almost seen as a commodity, right? That we had access to nature, but essentially nature provided for us, but it was a commodity. Where I see nature in the care of creation now as an act of stewardship, right? This is a responsibility that we have to care for God's creation. And I think flipping that stewardship, rather flipping that model, instead of nature serving us, but us seeing ourselves as essential to the care of creation, is something that is essential. Jim.
Talking about the difference of children. In 1970, I think was the first year after the first Earth Day, not positive about that. But I remember the event, and without remembering the date, I was working on 17th Street. And I was in my three-piece business suit, my banker's costume, walking down 17th Street. And there were a bunch of teenagers who were performing like average teenagers, moving around, lollygagging and giggling and doing all sorts of other stuff. And I was walking behind them just a little ways. And all of a sudden, one of them or two of them went over and picked up some trash out of the gutter and put it into the trash barrel. And I was so amazed. I mean, my generation never had done that. And not only that, I didn't think that any kids were doing that. And I went home and I told my wife, and I went back to the office and I told my friends that, you know, that kids are out picking up trash. I think that there is such a gulf between my generation and the kids that are going to probably carry the burden of this disaster. And I don't think we're even close to communicating with their despair.
What about, yeah,
Let me just check, make sure Zoomers, can you hear our comments okay? Susan, you can hear them okay, good. Our out microphone, thank you, Doug, are picking it up, okay. Go ahead.
My neighborhood is going through a real struggle right now over this nature thing and dominion and so forth. I do not have a household pet. When our children started outgrowing them, we quit getting new ones. But I love anybody else who has a pet and the love that they have for that pet. Well, 3 days ago, there was a letter, the email sent around in the neighborhood, 3 doors away. Their dog was killed overnight by a coyote. And after that was announced, 2 more families had dogs that were maimed. And would you believe one of them left a litter of 4 babies, 4 little cubs? This is just awful. So, I mean, I have all the sympathy in the world for them, but I'm wondering if in my own backyard and field, I all of a sudden, or well, it's been in a year maybe, I have a problem with prairie dogs, gophers, anything burrowing. I mean, they just like this big fountain that comes out, and then you have a huge hole that goes, it's really terrible. Well, as the habitat, the building of these prairie dogs, whatever they are, that I can't get anybody to come and help get rid of them. As they multiply, it seems like the coyotes and foxes and so forth are more prevalent. They just kind of walk along the fence line and look every direction, and then mainly overnight, they will somehow get into the neighbor's yard and kill the family pets. So what do you do? I mean, of course, if you take it close to home.
Birthday question.
I know, Jim?
Yeah, no, I'm coming from a different direction there. I live out here right next to that park where all the animals are, and I love it. And yeah, I see coyotes and all kinds of creatures. And I have a little dog. But first of all, I keep my dog on the leash. Second, if you have a little dog, don't let it out by itself at night or whatever. But also, I feel we have moved into those animals' homes, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And now we want to kill them all. I love it when I walk and I see the coyotes come across. Yesterday, they went like 5 feet next to me, right up the street, and I had the dog with me, But I cannot get angry about, I had even, what are they? They climb on trees.
Squirrels.
Raccoons.
No, raccoons, yeah. They come into the neighborhood. And true, yeah, my dog gets all excited and barks like crazy, right? But I cannot get upset about it because I moved there. And if we ask the sheriff or whoever to kill them all, I don't even want to live there then. I mean, I don't know, I just.
Jim and then Jim.
Maybe this will be later, but I do hope that Alan and you can talk about their tree planting across the city of Denver, whether it was intergenerational, getting back to youthful pessimism. But they have some input on something. You want to say that to later, but I think they have a voice on this topic. Sorry, Alan.
Okay, as far as prairie dogs are concerned, other burrowing animals. Contrary to what has been said, there are about 10% of the prairie dogs in this area as nature would have. And that they are a species that is there for consumption of predators. The predators are having a hard time finding enough to eat. And they're therefore preying on pets, on other things.
Yeah.
When we build houses all over the prairie dogs and the other rodents in areas, we are taking their food out of their mouth.
Yeah.
So there is the problem. I mean, we come in and we very much, like we have been doing for the last 1,000 years, we think that we have dominion over this area just because we could do it. And we are now suffering from our animals being the prey. And as a matter of fact, mountain lions are having a hard time getting along, and mountain lions are a real danger to small children.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of mountain lions, in this area. Mountain lions are so secretive that they are hardly ever seen, but they are overwhelmingly present all along the Front Range.
So I think what you're speaking to is really that kind of unintended consequence. I
Yeah.
mean, that I think so much in terms of deforestation and kind of the fast growth that we've seen in the housing communities, the displacement of the animals, and it's kind of like you only have a certain area, right? So it's got to go somewhere. They have to go somewhere. And you know, Helen, I guess I wish I had a specific answer, but I think, you know, you're really speaking to kind of the impact of
Well, and I was gonna say the family whose dog was killed, they have 2 little preschool kids. And how can you imagine, so how are those kids gonna grow up? Their attitude towards nature and so forth. And really, animals, household, domestic animals, they're like people to most of those themselves. I mean, they really are. My daughter's family lost 2, one from an illness and the other from an accident, and lost them within 6 months of each other. So, yeah. It's like they're still trying to get over this that happened last Christmas.
yeah, it's a real grief for
Oh,
sure.
yes, it really
Yeah.
is.
From your perspective, I mean, Jim, I heard what you said in terms of different generations, I think, come with a new awareness of an urgency, if you will. When I say climate change or I say climate justice, what are some of the things that come to your mind?
Carbon dioxide.
Water.
Water,
The brown water.
the brown cloud. I think especially being here in Colorado and the impact of the Colorado River. We know CPR, Colorado Public Radio, within the last 2 months did a great series on the Colorado River and the usage and kind of what I would say is the trajectory of harm of if we don't do something fast and make very intentional choices, it will have dire consequences for all of us. I think when I was in Israel and Palestine not too long ago, we met with a group that's working on kind of using the Dead Sea as a model and like taking out the salt and I mean, kind of all these different ways that they are exploring how do you repurpose water, how do you redirect water, how do you kind of work with conserving water to sustain life. And again, you know, I struggle sometimes when we talk about climate change because it does seem like we're raising the high alert level all the time, but like, where's the hope, right? Like, so how do we balance that? How do we think about what are the small steps we can take on the daily, each one of us, because I do think that's also cumulative and it counts. So whether you're taking a shorter shower or you're composting or you're, you know, putting a thermostat on your home that keeps the temperature at a lower degree so you can maintain the heat in your home, solar panels, all of that. Were you gonna say something?
Well, I think you hit it, is that I think people know that climate change is a thing, but they're waiting for like some grand action by others. And they think that it's like, we have to boil the ocean, and if we do this thing today, tomorrow, this probably goes away. And it's more of a, you know, you have to create habits of doing, if everything is like a little thing, it makes a little change, then that cumulative impact is huge. And I think that's kind of the disconnect is, you know, even people, you know, I'm in like my 40s and like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. I can just do this. I can do that. It's like, well, it does matter. It's because if you did it in isolation, that's one thing. But if everybody has that mentality, like, how do we get that shift across everyone? You know, we're not asking everybody to go vegan and, you know, not heat their homes or have air conditioning, but or you can't have flowers in your front yard. It's but what are the little things that you can do that make a big difference
Yeah.
that? I think that's the big challenge is, yeah, I think people waiting on the government to do something. It's like, well, the government's. Yeah, it's gonna take a while, like, look at Washington DC, it's like, there's very many different perspectives and like. We as individual citizens can have the biggest impact by just making changes, changing slight behaviors.
I think you're right. It has to be scalable, right? So the UN comes together for a climate change conference. They put out all these goals for different countries and they work at that level. But I also think, again, it's a daily choice. What can I do in my particular community, home, environment to have that increase the cumulative effect? Very deep.
I think we can learn a lot from our Native American brothers and sisters. And along with Jane, when I was teaching, we did teach this. And some of the most powerful books and picture books came from Native Americans. There's one chief, Chief Seattle. And if you read some of what he has written, and the children's books are dynamite. One is Brother Eagle, Sister Sky. And I remember reading it to my group of third graders sitting on the floor, having to wipe a tear as I read it. It is so touchy. And then there's another one, and I believe it's by Chief Seattle, that is How Can We Own the Sky? And all of them are extremely powerful. I mean, they got it.
Yeah, thank you for
Really?
sharing that. And
Yeah.
I'll close today actually with a poem by poet laureate Joy Harjo, who is also an Indigenous voice that's really
Yes.
speaking to this. If you have not read Braiding Sweetgrass, I would highly recommend it. Robin Wall Kimmerer is I think she calls herself a botanist, but she lives and speaks and breathes among creation. She talks about it in a way that I find it's beautiful. In a way that I have to say, the way that I was enculturated, I didn't necessarily understand. So Braiding Sweetgrass is the name of the book. And with that, I do think we have to talk about the care of creation as an intersectional issue, as it impacts and relates specifically to historically marginalized communities, people of color. When I lived in Denver, almost 24 years ago, there was a group here in Colorado that no longer exists called the Cross Community Coalition. And they were out by the Purina factory, predominantly people of color that were working to control the emissions of that factory. So when we look at the direct impact of our environmental impact, often that blueprint impacts people of color the most, who are living in places that do not have access, do not have they're living downriver, for example, so they get the harm of our waste. I was with a group after Hurricane Katrina, about 2 months after Hurricane Katrina. There's a group in New Orleans called the People's Institute. And so I was asked by them to come with a group of community organizers, faith-based community organizers, to come into places and work with communities, because FEMA wasn't really in there. They couldn't, all the bureaucracy of the government, to your point, it was at that level, but it wasn't kind of filtering into the people. So myself and about 7 other people went and met with the Huma Nation. The Huma Nation is a native tribe in Louisiana that's not recognized as a federally recognizable tribe, so they receive no federal access or money. They were living there, and the way that Katrina washed in, they had boats on their property. All of their community gardens were destroyed. They had no infrastructure to support the environmental impact of toxic waste, of oil and refinery byproduct that had come in. And if you look at the health of this community. And this is just one example. You can see this all across. You will see the racial disparity in terms of the health impact on communities of color as a result of environmental degradation. So lung cancer rates increase. There are various other cancer rates increase based on air pollution, based on soil contaminants. So I think to also see the intersection of environmental justice and environmental racism, I think they're interconnected. And so we have to also think about both.
Commerce City,
What's that?
Commerce City.
Commerce City, say more.
There's
The
a
refinery.
professor at Red Rocks Community College who is working with his students right now. There is a database that shows the economic and racial disparity in the Denver area. I mean, he has maps and so on that overlay what's going on in Swansea, that area, Commerce City, versus parts of Jefferson County that were originally redlined. And it's very eye-opening to see the disparity, the disease, the economic as well as racial differences.
Thank you.
A political religious perspectives. I hear people saying, I love my country and I love God. Then I come back thinking, well, if you love God and you love your country, do you care about the people? Do you care about the land? Do you care about the water and the air? And if they answer no to all that and say, no, that stuff has to take side thing to other to total individual freedom, then you start to wonder, what's your meaning of love?
Yeah.
It's a shame it's all wrapped up into political labels too, right? I mean, Earth Care is a progressive liberal issue, it seems, and it's hard to convince conservatives, seems, that it's something they should care about. But let me, while I'm thinking of it, go to Alan and ask Alan and you, what you've been doing with your tree planting. Could we hear what you've done?
Well, this was a project we pursued last year. It was the first time that this church participated in a community tree planting. We chose one company here in Denver that every year they donate trees to, and even plant trees to people who are not physically able to either pick up the tree and plant the tree. So we offered a volunteer group of people from the church to pick up some of these trees and plant them at individual homes all over Denver. And it was a success. It was a lot of work and coordination logistically, but
How many did you plant?
well, the group of us turned out to be about 15, 16 of us, and we had to subdivide into smaller groups to individual families. And each individual family requested anywhere from 2 to 5 trees to be planted in their yard. And you had to get approval from the local utility companies to make sure that there's no underground utility obstructing where they want to plant the tree. So that was the logistic part of it, that you had to work with the individual homeowner to clarify. And for those who didn't want to do it, you ended up doing it for them. And so it was quite a challenge. It was rewarding. A lot of the families really appreciated the trees and also the free labor to come and plant the tree. We gave them guidelines as to how to care for the trees, watering, and et cetera, et cetera.
Was
Thank
there
you, Al.
follow-up then to make sure they did that? I mean,
No, we gave them a sheet of instruction. And, we gave it to them, asked them if they had any questions and, yeah, and that was about it.
Great.
I love that example of, yeah, thank you for doing that on all of our behalf. I remember when my dad died, like I have a lot of allergies, and so like flowers are not really my thing, but you can actually designate now that people plant a tree, you know, in honor of someone, in memory of someone for a birthday. It's a great way, especially as a result of the fires, to help repopulate our forest. And this is probably, you know, Steve, to your point, yes, this is political. And I think it has to be. I remember when I lived in DC during Trump, we had signs that said climate change is real, Black Lives Matter. I mean, they were in our yards, and the fact that we have to keep saying this, that this is real, this is not imagined, this is not something that is progressive or liberal versus conservative, that it's real. And when we were just in Palestine, if you know anything about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you know that part of the way the wall, the separation wall is being built is cutting down olive groves. And these are trees that have been a source of generational wealth for centuries, right? This is where families go, they gather their olives, they make their olives pressed into olive oil, they sell it, it becomes a source of generational wealth for years to come. And so when the separation wall is built, it's wiping out trees that have been there, you know, passed on from generation to generation. So one particular night I was staying in a refugee camp and talking with this man who helped kind of design and build the nativity trail that we walked. And I said, like, Ahmad, what can we do? He said, you can help us rebuild trees, replant and reharvest the trees so that our children, our grandchildren, and generations to come have a place to come to. So that's just on the other side of the world, how environmental and political and all of it just gets mixed up together. And Steve, just one more thing. This is probably another class for another day.
Sure.
But I'm a real advocate for green burials. So if you have thought about that, if you're interested in that, there is a lot here in Colorado. Not all states have that kind of as part of their regulatory laws at the moment, but green burial is offered here in Colorado. And it's another thing to consider. So when you die, if you are going to a funeral home, you have the choice to be embalmed. You have the choice. They won't tell you that, but you do. But what they embalm you with are really harsh chemicals. And if you're being buried into the earth, even into a casket, that seeps out. So those are just little things, again, when we think of the cumulative things we can do to increase and improve our environmental footprint. That's just one more thing to think of.
Would cremation be favorable?
So actually this is really a different class, I think, but there are ways to do that in an environmental friendly way. There is actually a place in Colorado that does pyre funerals. And so lots of different options for doing that in a way that contributes to the care of the earth. And I think about it, you know, the story we tell, from ashes we come, ashes we will return. There is something organic about that, right? That we come from the earth, we are returned to the earth, and how good it would be to return to the earth something that is life-giving and sustaining. Yeah, lots of things.
I'm gonna give my body to the University of Colorado Medical School. They need bodies to.
there's compostable.
Yes.
Too, and especially for animals.
Yes.
know.
Yeah, you can actually buy compostable urns now. So I'm also a death doula, so this is where all this is coming from, but yeah. This is, they buy compostable urns. So technically, it's against the law to put any sort of ashes in rivers, oceans, that sort of thing. But if it's in a compostable urn, it disintegrates, it doesn't harm the animals, and it's a lot more environmentally friendly.
I was just.
Go ahead, and then I'm gonna call on Ann,
Oh.
has her hand up on Zoom, but Ann, go ahead.
Other people in other countries have been doing this for a long time. When we visited people and stayed with them in Germany in the 70s, it was mandated that they had to recycle. This was around Hamburg.
Yeah.
And so they've been doing that for quite a while. Another thing closer to home is, and it was really interesting that I saw this just this week, in Lincoln, Nebraska, and around that area, there is a firm called First Fiber, I think it's First Star Fiber or something. Anyway, they are helping with this whole situation, and they are telling the people in their area that there are some things that are not recyclable as we know them. They're really doing the fine grading of these things, and they are supplying, this firm is supplying hefty orange bags, so hefty is involved here too. And you put those things like straws and cardboard, corrugated cardboard, into these big, huge orange bags. And in that community, they know that those big orange bags have some things that can't be recycled that we thought were recyclable. And so they're doing a whole big thing. They go to conferences, they go to the zoo, they go everywhere with these big, huge orange bags that they give out to help people do those things. And I thought, we just need more of that to occur, but they're doing that in the country.
We've got about 10 minutes left. Ann, did you have a question? I see your yellow hand up on your screen.
Can you say me? Because I can't see you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Anyway, just to go along with, if you need any contacts for alternative burials, I took a class through Osher Long Life Learning, OLLI for short. I've got contacts on water burials and composting your body. And I also wanted to mention an amazing lady named Betty Harris. I've mentioned her quite a bit in other groups. And you don't have to be in Littleton to join her Littleton Garden Gang, but she really promotes, getting rid of your grass and doing alternative plantings for pollinator plants. And she has a huge recycling program of things that aren't easy to recycle. And from that group, the Zero Waste Gang got started. And they do all kinds of things too. But anyway, I would really encourage you to go online and Google them. And if you can't find the contact, I get emails from her all the time about ideas about what to do environmentally. And I did plant a tree already in honor of Paul, because he loved to walk the Highline Canal, which he can't do now because of his Alzheimer's, but through South Suburban, you can donate trees. And we did that quite a few years ago. Anyway, that's all I had to share. Just let me know if you need any contact for Betty Harris and her Littleton Garden Gang, if you're interested.
Thanks, Ann. I just want to say, as United Methodist, at the last two general conferences, our bishops have elevated the care of creation in a whole new way. They address this from the floor of General Conference, which is our every 4-year gathering of United Methodists from around the world. And so in their pastoral letter at the most recent General Conference, I want to read you their words. And this is called God's Renewed Creation, a Call for Hope and Action. We, the bishops of the United Methodist Church, call for a comprehensive response to the interrelated issues of poverty and disease, environmental degradation, and the proliferation of weapons and violence. We are aware of God's vision for creation, and we no longer see an list of isolated problems affecting people, plant, and animals. Rather, we see one interconnected system that is groaning in travail. And so this is an older book of discipline, but our book of discipline is kind of our binding rules as a church. There is a section in here called the social principles. The social principles are not binding, which means they are good intentions that hopefully people do. But in the social principles, there is a whole section on the natural world and kind of our theology as United Methodists around that. From that, every general conference, we pass different resolutions, giving guidance to United Methodists for the care of creation. The resolutions you can find online have everything to do from composting to environmental racism to water. So I just want to lift that up because I think it's, again, important to ground us in our faith. Within our global network of United Methodists, there is a creation care network. They do action alerts. They have a lot of different resources. They have a resource library, groups, organizations, and forums. And these are, again, are United Methodists all around the world. So if this is your particular passion, I would invite you to join the Care of Creation Network. Here in the Mountain Sky Conference, Earth Keepers, Kathy, and I did a webinar not too long ago about how to talk to your legislators about the care of creation from a faith-based perspective. I know Earth Keepers would like more of a community. They're doing a lot of great stuff. And I want to share specifically about what does climate justice look like here at St. Andrew. So within the last year and a half, I think this preceded me coming, but there was the call from our trustees for a green audit here at St. Andrew. We just had that completed within the last few months. And again, the trustees are really engaged in that. They're looking at things like, what does it mean for our recyclables to be sorted? And to your point, Jane, being able to actually be recycled. So for example, currently a lot of our recyclables can't be recycled because they have food in them or they have the remnants of food. So kind of looking at how do we recycle better as a church. We're looking at water conservation, specifically around our parking lots and where the draining kind of goes. We're looking at our plants to see how do we find more drought resistant plants. I will say, some of this has kind of provided an opportunity to engage Tresana because, you know, they're looking at our landscape and saying, why don't we have more beautiful flowers? Or we want it to look a certain way. So it's an opportunity for us, I think, to work with them to talk about the care of creation and how we're trying to be more sustainable as a community of faith. We're also looking at composting. I love composting, also like worms. Not everybody likes worms. So how do we do that on a larger scale? I think our preschoolers would love to get their hands in the dirt more. And a big one, and this one is again, something you can do at your own home, but looking at energy conservation. So making sure that our thermostats are set at a certain temperature and kind of maintain while we're in the building and using the building. And this is really important because now when you reserve a room in the building, it kind of goes into a system and it alerts the HVAC system as well. So you will have a cooler room or a warmer room, depending on what time of year you're in. But if you don't reserve the room and you show up for a meeting, what happens is people often come in and they'll say, I'm too hot or I'm too cold. Well, that triggers a response to our HVAC company. So they think something's wrong with the system. So then they have to come out, they do a repair visit, they find out nothing's wrong, just the room hasn't been reserved. So we're trying to kind of implement a system in which we're able to maintain a consistent temperature so that we're not fluctuating and we're certainly not using the services in order to better kind of maintain our stewardship, your stewardship of this beautiful space. So those are just some of the ways here at St. Andrew we're taking this on. I think we're one of the churches within the conference that's leading the way in green audit and energy efficiency as a building, looking at our equipment, looking at our space. But this is something I think the conference is going to have to take on in a much larger way because it impacts us all.
Have we considered solar panels on the roof?
We have, I think that's the beginning of a conversation. We've also had some requests for EV charging systems in our parking lot. So that's on the horizon. I think we have to kind of, it's baby steps, unfortunately.
Sure.
I like the last suggestion.
Which one's that, Steve?
The last one on the page.
Oh.
Even though I.
Light bar, yeah. So
Just like,
Becky,
I wanted to say one thing. This is a great list, but it's not even close to being, the number of things that we do. And I would be delighted to, come up with that, another 25 things.
who created this?
I did.
Okay,
I just-
so if you have more suggestions, maybe you can send them to Steve and we can get this list growing. Yeah.
It's just, has 10 simple things you can do to help protect the earth, reduce, reuse, recycle, volunteer cleanup in your neighborhood, educate people about climate change, conserve water, and so on.
I would just want one thing to add to this thing. I add it every time we have an environmental meeting like this. I read a long time ago that if people would hang their laundry out on cold days when you don't want to, I do that all the time. Go out there, you can put your laundry into the dryer. But on nice warm days when the breeze is blowing, if everyone would hang their clothes out on the laundry, there would not be a water shortage in Colorado. Amazing how much clothes dry. Yes, you can do that in Colorado.
If you have to go out, you have
Nobody's speaking of dryers.
Yeah.
Speaking of dryers, my dryer is either frying my clothes or not working, so I have to get rid of it because it gets too hot on the outside. It probably could be repaired. But I'm doing that, so I'm buying a new dryer. Now, how can I get rid of this other one without paying the big box people to haul it up? I mean, is there some place to take this? Or somebody else will repair it?
Well, they should take it and deliver them.
Yeah, I know, but is that going to the landfill?
I know, there are some appliance stores, like individuals, not like big box stores, but, often I think you can just donate it. And if it's in good working order, they'll take it. And if not, maybe they'll repair it and pass it along.
I don't know if they're still there, but there was a secondhand appliance store on South Broadway. I can't remember, it's been 10 years since I did this. We bought a freezer there that was secondhand. We paid $125 for it. And it is still working just fine.
Does anybody know
We need to-
if public service still picks up refrigerators and freezers and pays you for it?
Yeah.
Like $50? Do
They
they
do
do
that,
that?
yeah, they have to pay for it.
Usually on your public service bill.
We need to. Sorry about it, didn't mean to cut you off. We need to wrap up, but I'm gonna take Gene as the last comment.
Just, this class prides itself in communication. With all respect to, needing a bigger list, Jim, we're very fortunate in our church that we appreciate humor. And, sometimes we get it, and we certainly did today with, Pastor Mark, and the humorous aspects of communicating on a serious topic. Sometimes Ron will use humor, and sometimes it's irreverent. Mary and I, a couple of nights ago, Mary and I heard a lecture at the University of California. She heads up in her disciplinary program. And her name is Nicole Seymour. She's published a book called Bad Environmentalism. It's published by the University of Minnesota Press. She's not a lightweight. She heads up an interdisciplinary program at the University of California. Her contention, she does research, she's a sociologist, that there's so much gloom and doom that the people who know the best, and this is paradoxical, who know the most, act the very least. And whether you believe that or not, you know, read her book. But anyway, she makes use of satire and irreverence. And Mary, we had different reactions a little bit on this. She feels that satire and humor, as Mark was doing today in his sermon at times, can better communicate the dilemmas. And she takes shots both at the right and the left, the liberals as well as the arch conservatives. So she does provide another means by communicating on serious topics. And some people may not like the way she, some of her imagery and et cetera and so forth, but she makes use of media and et cetera and so forth. But anyway, I just wanted to add that as a supplement. But thank you for keeping it simple, because I can relate to simple. I get overwhelmed with too many. If something simple works for me, so thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Amy, I think she has a closing word, but thank you for your time and your passion today.
Of course. So this is from the poet laureate Joy Harjo. Remember the sky that you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon, who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn, that this is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away tonight. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You were the evidence of life, of a mother and hers. Remember your father, for he is your life also. Remember the earth whose skin you are, red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. Remember the plants and trees and animal life who have all given their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind, remember her voice. She knows the origin of the universe. Remember, you are all people and all people are you. Remember that you are this universe and this universe is you. Remember all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember language comes from this. Remember the dance language that life is. Remember. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.